Geography. Not only did Christ begin his ministry on Jordan's banks, close to the spot where Israel entered Canaan under Joshua, he had previously gone down from Palestine into Egypt and had been brought up thence by divine command. If we may believe that the evidences for the Sinaitic Peninsula outweigh those for the traditional idea that Quarantania in Judea was the scene of his temptation, we see further that he had passed through 40 days of trial where Israel had been tried for 40 years. Farther west and farther south he had not been. He also went as far north as Phoenicia, as far east as Perea. But his life as a whole was spent in a space represented by 1 or 2 English counties. At his birth, Herod ruled all that had been divided among the 12 tribes, and Idumea also, a larger kingdom in all than David's. During his ministry, Samaria and Judea formed the Roman province of Judea under a procurator, while Galilee, once the portion of Asher, Naphtali, Zebulun, and Issachar, and Perea, once the portion of Reuben and Gad, were ruled by Antipas. What had once been Manasseh's eastern portion was under the sway of Philip. Luke 3:1. 600 years of Gentile domination had left many traces in new half-heathen cities with foreign names. The most famous New Testament names, such as Caesarea, the Roman capital of Judea, Capernaum, the Roman capital of Galilee, Tiberias, Julius, Caesarea Philippi, Bethsaida, Cana, Chorazin, Nazareth, Gadara, Emmaus, and Bethany, are not mentioned at all in the Old Testament. Reserving the geographical extension of the church to be dealt with from the beginning next term, we now note the places most hallowed by the Lord's presence, namely Bethlehem, his birthplace, Nazareth, his own city in youth, Capernaum, his own city in manhood, see Matthew 9:1, Bethsaida and Cana, each the home of 5 of the 12 apostles, the Lake of Galilee, the most sacred sheet of water which this earth contains, according to Stanley, as significant of his teaching as the stern desert was of the Baptist teaching. Bethany, his favorite retreat in Judea, and Jerusalem, where his work was completed. The ancient town of Bethlehem lies on the ridge of a long gray hill, only 300 feet lower than the top of Helvellyn, 6 miles to the south of Jerusalem. Bethany nestles on the eastern slope of Olivet, on the road to Jericho, 1 mile and 3/4 from Jerusalem. John 11:18. But though Christ began his public ministry in Judea and was born and died there, he began to proclaim his gospel in Galilee, which remained throughout the chief scene of his work. Its soil was the most fertile and its climate the finest in Palestine. Well wooded, it yielded wine and wheat and olive oil abundantly. Its 240 towns and villages filled it with the hum of many-colored life. Since the captivity, it had been largely peopled by heathen and was looked down upon, therefore, by the southern Jews. Matthew 4:15. Many Syrians, Phoenicians, Arabs, and Greeks had settled there in Christ's day, but its Hebrew inhabitants, though less bigoted and narrow than the Judeans, were most faithful to the law and had more of its life, if less of its form. Their mountain air made them patriots and heroes. Again and again, they were the first to defy the Roman arms, and they were the last to defend the ruins of Jerusalem. The Galilean loves honor, the Jew loves money, says the Talmud. The beautiful lake named Chinnereth, Gennesaret, or Tiberias, 12.5 miles long by nearly 7 miles wide at its widest, which is about the length of Loch Mari but wider, was called the Eye of Galilee. Deserted now, its bright waves were then thronged not only with fishing boats, but with Roman war vessels and gilded pinnaces from Herod's palace. They are fringed with gay oleanders and set in smiling pastures. Their shoreline is broken into exquisite little bays, and the hills slope up gently from the water. The rabbis expressed their enthusiasm for its beauty in a proverb which had a deeper meaning than they knew. God has created 7 seas in the land of Canaan, but one only, The Sea of Galilee has he chosen for himself. On its shores, which Josephus calls the crown of Palestine, and on the much frequented high road from Damascus to Ptolemais, Isaiah 9:1, lay the thriving and busy little town of Capernaum, whose inhabitants had no leisure for the teaching of Christ, Matthew 11:23. It is now too utterly destroyed for its site to be certainly determined. Nazareth is a secluded mountain village, 1,200 feet above the sea, in an amphitheater of hills overlooking one of the little folds of the great plain seen as the hills open. The comely women and bright-eyed children who still gather about its clear and abundant fountain attest to its pure air, while the traces of terrace cultivation on its hills and the many cemeteries show how large its population once was. Amid the peaceful loveliness of its myriad flowers and gardens of fig and orange and olive and cypress, Jesus passed his youth of humble obedience and patient obscurity, and even as the risen Lord who claimed Paul's allegiance called himself by its name, Acts 22:8.